What happens to the power law when BlackRock says, you know what, we fucked up, it should be a 20% Bitcoin allocation? What happens then? What happens when we find out there's nation state stacking going on? Like,
Getty Boy says it's all included in the power law. It predicted he predicted Michael Saylor, he predicted BlackRock, he predicted everything that's happening. It was all in the power law.
MSTR is going so much higher because of their.
Yeah. So all right, then 35K MSTR.
By the way, I'm bearish because if you take Saylor's own calculations, when he said it's going to get to $13 million or grow at 29%, if you just grow that, his estimation last time I checked, it was like $90,000 a share.
I know $1 million seems like a really high price, and it is, right? But it's certainly not Bitcoin's end state. That's not the ultimate price for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going higher than $1 million into the future, and we're only 10x away from $1 million.
Do you know what's not speculation? What's not speculation is while Bitcoin's been going down the last couple of days, BlackRock is buying up thousands of Bitcoin. What's not speculation is MSTR has got $42 billion to go shopping with. What's not speculation is El Salvador is continuing to buy Bitcoin. What's not speculation is Russia's looking at a strategic Bitcoin reserve. What's not speculation is we now have a template for an executive order for America buying Bitcoin in a strategic reserve. All of that is not speculation. No one was expecting BlackRock to come in as hard as they have. It took them 10 years to put $30 billion into their, the gold ETF, and it's taken like 10 months to do it with Bitcoin.
Two big sins in Bitcoin. Number one, not being bullish enough on Bitcoin. Number two,
Bing bong. I am back with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast where I've got both British and American HODL in the house. This is prepared to be the most bullish interview that you have possibly ever heard in your entire life. I'm getting jacked up just sitting here. We got American HODL with the sunglasses on. 100K's hitting different. But boys, I got to start off by asking you, the power law. Right? It's a big controversial topic. We've got, people predicting X amount for Bitcoin of next year. You guys have both predicted that it's going to absolutely smash and skyrocket because there's a lot of factors that aren't really poised for that. So I'll leave it there. Where do you guys think of the power law and trying to predict Bitcoin's price based on that for 2025?
Hold on,
you got British. You got to go first. You're like the power law fucking nightmare over here for these guys.
Listen, all I'm saying is all of those people that gave us all that shit trying to promote this bullshit better sell their fucking Bitcoin at $200,000 because they started saying this is going to 200,000. It's going to crash down. You got fucking, you've got Mario over here trying to say, okay, you can multiply your Bitcoins. So trying to get people to, exit their positions. You better sell your fucking Bitcoin. Otherwise, I'm coming after every single one of those power law people. And I want to see evidence that you took profits at $200,000 like you were trying to tell everyone else to do and sacrifice their future family's wealth. That's my opinion on the fucking power law. Power opinion. That's the real name.
So, yeah, the power law thing is, to me, confusing, and it seems to rope in a certain type of, let's just be honest, autistic person who believes that they've found some immutable law of the universe and like this simply must happen, right? And fundamentally, I think the problem I have with it is that it's a bet against human action. People sometimes talk about like the game theory of Bitcoin being like, it's inevitable, bro, and that's true. It is inevitable because of human action. If you take the human action out of the mix, no, it no longer becomes inevitable. It's inevitable because of the way it incentivizes all of our collective greed to work for benefit of the system instead of against the system. And so I think if you look at the changing geopolitical landscape of like, talk of the strategic Bitcoin reserve, which we talked about in the last show we did, Brandon, and like, BlackRock now saying that you should have a 2% Bitcoin allocation. What happens to the power law when BlackRock says, you know what, we fucked up, it should be a 20% Bitcoin allocation? what happens then? What happens when
Spaghetti
we
Boy
find
says
out
that
there's nation state stacking going on? Like
Spaghetti Boy says it's all included in the power law. It predicted he predicted Michael Saylor, he predicted BlackRock, he predicted everything that happening. It was all in the power law.
I think also, by the way, I'm not going to pick on anybody directly here, but like
I'll do that.
If somebody is telling you that they have this perfect system that it spits out only correct answers all the time, the obvious question you should ask them is like, are you a multi-billionaire then? And if the answer is no, then it's like, okay, well, why don't you, for either two things here, the system's not real and it doesn't work, or two, you don't trust your own system, both of which require explanations. And so like, I don't know, man. I don't buy into all that shit. I've been through this with stock to flow, which I promoted, because I liked it as a meme. And then I saw how the meme took on this life of its own and became like a thing where people thought it was real. And then even if it was real, because the market thought it was real, it didn't work anymore. And there was a reflexive phenomenon there. So it's like, I don't know, stay away from all this bullshit of like people telling you exactly what's going to happen, because they're going to be wrong,
Yeah, no one was expecting the president of the United States of America in 2024 to start talking about having a Bitcoin strategic reserve. That was on no one's card in January. I guarantee you that. No one was expecting BlackRock to come in as hard as they have. It took them 10 years to put $30 billion into their the gold ETF, and it's taken like 10 months to do it with Bitcoin. They put out a marketing piece the other day where they called gold a shiny metal. BlackRock called gold a shiny metal. No one is expecting this. No one was expecting January alone for politicians to start dropping like flies. No one is expecting this. You cannot predict what's going to happen here. And unfortunately, as a non-math PhD douchebag, one thing I can tell you with my 5 minutes of study is that most things start off looking like some kind of power law, and then it very rapidly emerges that it's actually an S-curve of adoption, which is what technology normally goes through. And that's what I think is going to happen here. And all these people are going to be left selling their Bitcoin, trying to multiply them, and they're going to end up with nothing, which is what pisses me off the most about, Giuseppe.
Well, yeah, I've seen some power law here and saying things like, it's mathematically impossible that we go to like $1 million in the next like few years, right? And it's like, what does that mean? Mathematically impossible? Like, if a bunch of nation states and a bunch of power players on Wall Street all decide to start buying Bitcoin, and a bunch of corporates decide to start doing a MicroStrategy, then how can you say that it's mathematically? It just makes no sense. It's not even a serious theory. Even like, it's not. By the way, they don't say it's a theory; they say it's a law, right? Right. At least Plan B was like, hey, this is a model, and all models are eventually going to get broken. He just thought his model would be broken to the upside, and it turned out to be broken to the downside. And then he came out with like 30 different models because the original model wasn't working. But then he doubled back and he was like, actually, the original model does work. And so it's like, listen, I saw somebody on Twitter being like, hey, Bitcoin's going to 72K because there's a golden fib retracement on the Fibonacci sequence and there's a wick-off pattern. And, we're looking at a serious BART on the 4-hour candle. And you're just like, what? Shut the fuck up. Like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking. You're guessing. You're doing divination. It's just random pattern seeking. It's false attribution. And if you're new here, just ignore all those people because they don't know fucking shit about fuck.
That's all speculation. You know what's not speculation? What's not speculation is while Bitcoin's been going down the last couple of days, BlackRock is buying up thousands of Bitcoin. What's not speculation is MSTR has got $42 billion to go shopping with. What's not speculation is El Salvador is continuing to buy Bitcoin. What's not speculation is Russia's looking at a strategic Bitcoin reserve. What's not speculation is we now have a template for an executive order for America buying Bitcoin in a strategic reserve. All of that is not speculation. Power law, power opinion, stock to flow, charts, all this other shit is pure and utter speculation. And the extent of your intelligence with Bitcoin has to be, do you believe in supply versus demand? That's it. It's a very, very simple asset to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that you guys have lined out like all the points that you cannot model theoretically. So I mean, where do you guys think this is going then? Do you think it's definitely going to break to the upside? I mean, American HODL, last time you were on here, you said like with all these factors, you could very well see like $1 million worth of Bitcoin next year in 2025. And I mean, it seems like with more and more nation states coming on, businesses coming on as well, that could be a very real possibility because we don't know how much FOMO could come in and, on all those factors. So do you still see it as something where this thing, the exit velocity is just taken off here before our eyes?
Well, like I said on the last show, I assign different probabilities, like if we get an SBR versus if we don't get an SBR. And so, yeah, I think with an SBR, that's appropriately bullish, like one that's buying like 1 million plus Bitcoin, I think that you are going to see all those things. That's my personal opinion. I would put a pretty high weighting on that. But without the SBR, I think we're in for more of a diminished return cycle. The big question here is like, does the diminished returns idea that this goes back to the power law guys, because they effectively believe in diminished returns and they believe there's like a 200K ceiling there. Or I would say the power law adherents and the people that believed in diminished returns, they share that view that 180, 200K, that's about the top. Do those people get shaken out of their positions? And when they get shaken out of their positions, does Bitcoin run against them? And when it runs against them, do they then FOMO back into their positions? And if that occurs, then it is going to go much, much higher, that 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 to 1 million, in my view. Now, I think that it's going to be a long year. Just to spell this out for people, what I think is that I think that we're going to take, the market climbs a wall of worry, right? So like it's going to chip away at like 110, 120, 130, just climb. And then when we get to that 180, 200 level, which we're going to fight hard to achieve, I believe, I think we're going to fall from there because there will be a lot of profit taking around there. And then the question is, does the bull market, resuscitate itself and go crazy into the end of 25, the beginning of 26? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors at play. I can't call it definitively either way. But we'll see what happens with the SBR and the diminished returns hypothesis.
British, what do you think of all that? Do you think that the SBR is an absolute game changer? I mean, you lined out a few other countries potentially, emulating that. Like, how, I guess, vital do you think that is to see Bitcoin hit that exit velocity?
Yeah, there's two things for me that are absolute and utter game changers in going into next year. Number one is the SBR, as all lined out. Number two, it really depends on whether MSTR can scale the debt markets the way that Michael Saylor is pitching they can. Because if they go in and they go get another, let's say they already did 42 billion, right? So let's say they go and get $100 billion of debt that they've got to fulfill. Well, that in essence puts a put in the market. That's going to last a very, very long time on the price. And of course, MicroStrategy is buying up that Bitcoin. They're not buying up that Bitcoin to trade that Bitcoin or sell that Bitcoin, right? So whatever Bitcoin MicroStrategy has is, guaranteed to be out of the market and not available for trading. So I think it really, those are my two game-changing moments. The $42 billion was unbelievable when they got that. And if they go back and, he's already said he wants to pivot to a more broader bond market to raise that capital. So if he manages to do that, you got a $100 billion put from Michael Saylor. You got a strategic national reserve from the US, Russia, everywhere else. Because remember, as soon as the US does it, everyone else has to, right? We just had the first time there was a young lady talking about, a strategic national reserve in the European Union finally, right, recently. So all of it is coming, and those are the two game changers. Everything else is in my opinion, expected, and I think we see around the $250,000 level. But if those two things happen, it's you're talking a ridiculous prices.
By the way, yeah, Bruce, that's a good point. Actually, is that it's not actually one SBR. Because once the American SBR, there's this saying that when America gets sick, the rest of the world catches a cold. So it's like once America does it, that's the entire G20 doing it, and Russia and China, right? So you get all the top three most powerful countries in the world and the rest of the G20 following in quick succession. And it's just like, to me, I look at that and I think to myself, how the hell? These are all countries with money printers. How do all the people with the fake money buying the hard money, how do they not drive up the price of the hard money in fake money terms? Because that's what you're really talking. Like, at the end of the day, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, but like, we're talking about the fiat denominated value. So it's not hard for them to drive the fiat denominated value if they're all in a stacking competition with each other.
Yeah. And by the way, they're incentivized to do it because once they drive it up, they can borrow against it because they can put it on their treasury and start borrowing against it from IMF and driving more debt in order to do things that they want to do. So all of this, it's just like what's happening with MicroStrategy, except on a national scale. That's what you're looking at, right? Like, it's like the US is basically MicroStrategy, except it's its own bond market and can decide however much money it wants to give itself. And when that happens, and then you got China, Russia, and everyone else jumping on the bandwagon. Look, the EU is a bit of a joke, but as a block, as a trading block, it's pretty powerful in terms of how much capital it can drive. So imagine you've got the United States, the EU, Russia, and China all, vying for Bitcoin. We can all get together and snap some more fucking spaghetti at that point.
By the way,
are you looking for the best way to store your seed phrase? Well, I've got it for you. It's Stampseed. They've got the #1 punch place where you can order a full-on package where they've got every single thing. They've got all the letters. You could just get it in there. And they've got this sick hammer, which they've engineered to make it so easy for you to punch in that titanium steel plate and store your seed phrase in the most secure way possible. So go ahead and get your Bitcoin off of these exchanges and use promo code Green Candle for 15% off. They're helping power the show. They've got the Bitcoin logo. You can punch it into your seed phrase as well. If you could see it here, they've got a lot of cool stuff. And now I'm helping empower you to get your Bitcoin off an exchange utilizing Stampseed and storing your seed phrase in the most secure way possible. Now get to it. All right, back to the show.
I know $1 million seems like a really high price, and it is, right? But it's certainly not Bitcoin's end state. That's not the ultimate price for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going higher than $1 million into the future, and we're only 10x away from 1 million. We do 10x's in Bitcoin all the fucking time. That's something that Bitcoin is known for. It's a cute little thing we do. It's like in 2017, we did a 20x in a single year. And yeah, it was sporadic the whole way up. It's not like it went just straight up every month. So like, plan for the journey to be volatile. It's kind of like Saylor's been saying, like, volatility is vitality. But to think to yourself that Bitcoin can't do a 10x, I think is asinine. Now maybe you're listening to me in British and you're like, these fucking retarded moon boys, fuck them. What do they know? You know what I mean? This is hopium. They're high on their own supply, blah, blah, blah. But I was listening to this interview with Peter Thiel recently the other day on Piers Morgan show. And Piers Morgan asked Peter Thiel, why did you sell Facebook stock too early? Because you cost yourself $2 or $3 billion by doing that. And Thiel's answer was that he had correctly envisioned that Facebook stock would go from $1 billion to 10 billion to 100 billion, but that he had a mental block where he didn't think it would be easy to go from 100 billion to 1 trillion. And actually, that was the easiest part of the journey. And when we talk about compounded returns, all of the returns come at the very end. So if you are bearish on Bitcoin, you think Bitcoin can only go to 200K, only go to 300K, only go to 1 million, only go to 2 million, whatever, you're going to end up leaving the vast majority of your gains on the table, because the vast majority of your gains are going to come at the end if you're a long-term hodler. So like, yeah, sure, the gains have been good up until now, but in nominal terms, you're going to have the same gains in percentage terms with higher, numbers in nominal terms. And so all of the money is going to be flowing to you at the very end. And if you fade that trade, you're going to end up fucking yourself and your family's lineage. So it's very important that you are correctly and appropriately bullish. The two big sins in Bitcoin: number one, not being bullish enough on Bitcoin. Number two, being too bullish on Bitcoin. And being too bullish on Bitcoin usually looks like taking leverage, because then you end up fucking blowing yourself up and you don't get to make it to the promised land. But either one is not going to allow you to get to the promised land. If you're not bullish enough, you don't get there. If you're too bullish, you don't get there. So stay in the pocket, hodl your Bitcoin. If you want to do stuff like MSTR, do a little bit of it. Like my weighting of MSTR to Bitcoin is 80-20. Like I'm 80% Bitcoin, 20% MSTR. And then MSTR is all in retirement vehicles, which I can't easily go to cash and buy Bitcoin with, right? And so for me, that makes a lot of sense. You got to do what makes sense for you. But the key thing is to have your core Bitcoin position and to hold it for a long time into the future and be appropriately bullish on where this thing goes, because this thing is going to the hundreds of millions of dollar range.
Yeah. So to put that into like imaginable perspective, the entire world's real estate market is $350 trillion. A $1 million Bitcoin is a $20 trillion market, $21 trillion market. Think about that. That's it. So a $1 million Bitcoin it's like, that's when Bitcoin's getting started as its use value in the space. And as we've seen, it's accelerating past the growth of all of these other assets because Wall Street's identified Bitcoin as an asset that they can scale without having any social cost, without having any of these things that they had to worry about with real estate, even equities to a certain extent, because people have jobs and all this other shit in these companies. Whereas with Bitcoin, you can just put your foot to the accelerator, print as much money as you want, shove it all in there. Property prices can come down. Your governments can continue to get elected. There's no chance of revolutions, et cetera, et cetera. So they're about to turn the jets on Bitcoin.
Totally.
Well, let's talk about.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, HODL.
No, I was just going to say, British, on the real estate point. I think it was Peter Schiff was on Twitter the other day being like, Bitcoin's not like, or he was mad that Michael Saylor kept analogizing Bitcoin to Manhattan real estate. And he's like, Bitcoin's not at all like real estate. It doesn't have cash flows. It's not a productive asset, blah, 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 blah. And I think it was punter Jeff came in and was like, yeah, you know what else Bitcoin doesn't have? It doesn't have fucking hurricane disaster insurance. It doesn't have like decay. It doesn't have unruly tenants. It doesn't have property destruction. It doesn't get termites. You know what I mean? It's like real estate is a shit coin. We're all used to living in a world where real estate is highly valued. What was the number you said? 300 trillion?
350 trillion.
350. Yeah. That's retarded. There's no way in hell it should be 350 trillion. That is grossly mispriced. And it's mispriced because we have an ineffective store of value in the form of fiat currency. And so because fiat currencies on average are going up 14% per year in terms of total supply, people have been getting devalued to fuck, and the average person doesn't know what to do about it. So they put their money into real estate. And, during the 20th century, that was a good thing to do, right? A lot of people's families did that. They got rich on it. But now the appropriate thing to do is to put your money into Bitcoin going forward, because Bitcoin is going to demonetize some portion of the real estate market. Because think about it. I mean, if you're a millennial first-time home buyer in America or in Canada or in the UK or in Australia, whatever, these are all extremely expensive home markets with multi-million-dollar price tags on almost any property that you would consider, like, you would deem worthy of your family living in, right? So you got a $1-2 million price tag on even the most basic properties in almost all of these countries. Does that sound right to any